Hello everyone, author Tillery here, the Mistress of Horror. Welcome back to my channel. Before we get started, but you press that subscribe button and ring that bell so you know when I'm uploading new videos. Welcome to the Mistress Book Reviews, where I do book reviews, rather non-spoiler or spoiler. I tend to try to keep them spoiler-free if I can. This month, I'm reviewing Bite by Richard Laymon. And I decided to review this one because I'm in the middle of a readathon called Reading in Rumps, which is all books by Richard Laymon. And I picked Bite because it was vampire based. So I'm trying to figure out what to say about this book. It's definitely long, at least the ebook version, which clocks in at 516 pages. I'm not exactly the biggest fan of super long horror novels. To me, horror works best in short to medium length stories, or maybe a full-size novel at most. But once you start going well past that, it becomes an issue, for me anyway. Sure, write a long horror story if you can keep the reader engaged in the horror effect. And by horror effect, I mean creepiness, tension, maybe even fear at the most. But by the time I got halfway through this book, I didn't even feel like I was reading horror anymore. I don't usually review books I find mediocre or just okay, but since I've been reading Richard Laymon lately for the Reading in Rumps readathon, this one had to go on my review schedule for the month. Bite follows the lead character Sam and the secondary lead Kat. Sam, to me, seems like I don't know, late 30s, probably early 40s male who's down on his luck and just doesn't have a lot of confidence. But I was wrong. As I get through the book, I found out he's in his mid 20s, and I just didn't pick that up. That didn't ring true to me reading the character. But hey, do what you will with that. And then Kat, the secondary lead I mentioned, I'm still unsure of her age-wise, but they went to school together, so she must be around the same age. Also, didn't really seem that age to me. I just wasn't picking up on that. So I'm not sure Richard Laymon could write people in their 20s. They didn't seem like they were. That's just my take on that. But I digress. The story kicks off with Kat coming to see Sam for help killing a vampire. Yep, you heard that right. This book is called Bite, and it is technically based around a vampire. But here's the thing. Vampire spends most of the book locked in the trunk of a car with a stake in his chest and metal fangs. I guess he's one of, more or less, one of those techno vampires. Maybe one of those 80s concepts of what a modern vampire might be. I'm not sure. Anyway, the character's name is Elliot, the vampire that is, and to be honest, I started to doubt whether he was even a vampire, which I assume might have been part of the twist, but even if it wasn't the most compelling twist. I kept reading, assuming that by the end, it'd be confirmed he was really a vampire since there really wasn't much else going on. One of the more annoying things about the book was how often female anatomy was randomly gawked at, touched, or subjected to something awkward or downright inappropriate at times. It's not that I'm against those things happening in a horror story per se, especially if they're part of the plot, but they have to be placed well. Here, it just felt out of place or inserted for shock value. For example, there's a character named Snow White, because of his white hair, who shows up and becomes way too important if you ask me. At one point, he randomly slaps the female lead's rear end while interrogating them. She had fallen partially into the trunk, and instead of just being menacing in a horror kind of way, he just starts slapping her repeatedly to get answers, while, of course, beating on the male lead as well. It was weird and felt very out of left field. I was like, okay then. Aside from that, the story just dragged. By the time I hit the halfway mark, I was over it. Getting through the rest of the book felt like pulling teeth, and honestly, a lot of it wasn't very memorable. I didn't have the best time with this one. I'm giving it 3 stars only because I actually enjoyed the beginning. It felt promising. But Laymon dragged the plot out way too long, and it didn't pay off. I did see his attempts at trying to keep you engaged by adding new characters to the story and trying to give it some kind of layers, if you will, but it just fell flat to me. Since this is a semi-non-spoiler review, I won't go into any deep details. I'm hoping the next Richard Laymon book I'm starting today will lean more into actual horror. And I get that horror is a broad genre, duh, I write in it. Sometimes horrific incidents alone can qualify a story as horror, but this one felt more like a thriller that just happened to have a somewhat vampire tossed in. So there you have it. That's my review for Bite. It was okay, but I wouldn't read it again. I'd only recommend it to people who enjoy slower paced, drawn out thriller horror hybrids. Until next time, stay scared.